Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and it is a big world out there. It's hard for me to keep up with everything, but the European Union, one of the most vital tools of globalization, has really taken a large blow with the Brexit scene. And now Theresa May stepping down, having elections, but the thing is, they just go on appointing people. And we're going to talk about all that with an expert on the matter, Tony Gosling. He is a former BBC reporter. He has, I believe you have your own radio show, right?
Yeah, in Bristol, in the UK, and every Friday evening between 6 and 8, we have a politics program where we always get a local politician, either a member of parliament or a local councillor, to run through mainly national stories, but we also do international stuff as well, Jason.
Well, here in the United States, I hate to say it, but we're pretty self-centered. The majority of the population has no idea about anything that's going on overseas, in London, in Britain, really anywhere most of the time. I mean, unless...
So do you know where Bristol is?
Barely. I know it's a place.
Right, okay. It's about 120 miles west of London, and it's the port from which John Cabot sailed to so-called discover America back in 1497. And he was an Italian, and he was doing a mission for the Bristol merchants. And, so that was really the beginning of the colonization, with the Mayflower and stuff coming after that. Bristol was where these people came from. And the port was a Templar port in medieval times, very, very controlled by the money men and controlled by the people who were making success through trade and trade agreements, which is where we come back to the EU and Brexit, I guess.
Well, I guess it is kind of like the veiled unit for that mode of globalization, for sure. But you were the first person to mention Boris Johnson to me when we were talking about Bilderberg. And basically, was it right before Bilderberg that May announced her resignation? I think maybe a week or two before the event. She announces her resignation. You say that basically this is the guy that's going to be doing it. He says, we're going to leave. It's absolutely going to happen. Deal or no deal. I want to know who this guy is, whether or not they're actually going to leave, and what difference is it going to make in a government that just appoints people and basically imposes its rule, not by the will of the people at all?
All right. Yes, that's three questions in one. But the last question first, which is what difference will Brexit make? It's basically a massive, massive difference. It's the one thing that the oligarchy in Europe just do not want to happen. They've got their little plan, which is to have a United States of Europe. This is quite open now, and some of the people who've just been appointed last week to run the European government, they're quite happy and open to say this stuff. So it is a massive, massive change. Now, what were your other questions? Now, Boris, are we going to actually leave? This is an open question because it's a battle, it's a fight to leave. And although the people have decided it in a vote back in 2016, it doesn't look as if most of the politicians that we elect to do these jobs actually want to leave themselves, because there's a massive gravy train, particularly for bad politicians. The EU is an incredible boondoggle. It's basically where all the bad politicians go after they get kicked out by the public. They get nice jobs in the EU. And so there's a lot of people who are just like kind of wannabe politicians, wannabe change the world types. Actually, they see politics as just a job like any other. They don't really care about people. They just want a kind of career structure, and the EU has given them that. But which of these two guys is going to actually make a difference? It's quite clear. Jeremy Hunt. Okay, let's just go through the pair of them. In now the two left in the running, who will be chosen by, I think it's around about 120,000 members of the Conservative Party, because this is an existential threat to the Tory party, Brexit. If they don't achieve Brexit, then the Conservative Party is dead, because it's been a major driver behind Brexit. That is to say, the members of the Conservative Party, these 120,000 or so people who are going to decide between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt. So Boris is more anti-Russia and less anti-Iran. Hunt is more anti-Iran and he seems to be less anti-Russia. Although they're both anti-both, there seems to be a bit of Boris seems to be more against Russia than against Iran. The clear thing, though, Boris is the clear leader in the game, because he is much more advocating for a no-deal Brexit and to get out by any means on the 31st of October, which, of course, is an incredible date for anyone to have chosen, being Halloween, where the souls of the dead are resurrected somehow one night. That same night where we try and leave the EU. So Boris is a very close friend of David Cameron and George Osborne, Nathaniel Rothschild. They were all in the Bullingdon Club together at Oxford, and that's the club where they go around kind of getting drunk, snorting cocaine, smashing places up. I should say allegedly snorting cocaine, probably, although it's highly likely this is the sort of thing that went on. Certainly Osborne is, I've spoken to people who, say that he was. But anyhow, the point being that they would smash places up and then George Osborne would come along the next day to the Publican or whatever with a checkbook and say how much for the damage last night and sign any amount, basically. And that was how they cut their teeth at Oxford. These are mostly people who didn't have a lot of real academic qualifications, but they managed to get into Oxford through privilege. And while they're there, Jason, they get told, right, well, you are the guys that are going to be running the country, which doesn't sound like democracy to me. So Boris is one of those. The former mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, I spoke to last week, said, well, because Boris succeeded Ken as mayor of London. And he said, well, the guy was never really interested in politics. He's not a politician. He wants to be a celebrity. He wants the limelight. He wants to be in the news, in the cameras, because he thinks it'll give him a better chance of getting a girlfriend. This is the sort of guy Boris is. And also, he was proven to have lied in the Skripal affair, where we had this whole business of this Novichok, which now looks as if it may even be a completely made up nerve agent that doesn't actually exist, which was a formula which was given to a Russian in order to try and see if he would then pass it on, and he did, even though it looked as if it might be a real, it might not be. So anyway, Boris lied about that. He basically said in public, he said, oh well, the Porton Down chemical weapons establishment in Wiltshire told me that this was Russian stuff. It had to be from Russia. And then the guy a couple of days later from Porton Down, the director of the chemical weapons establishment, actually came on TV and said, I basically said, I didn't say that. Yeah, so he was calling Boris out. Boris is prepared to make lies like that. And that was while he was foreign secretary. But he did resign on principle from being foreign secretary when the backstop was introduced by Theresa May. Remembering, of course, that Theresa May's husband was the main person. This came out a few weeks ago. People don't know this. Her husband, Philip May, is one of the partners at something called Capital Group in Los Angeles, a massive investment firm who have made the major shareholding in BAE and a massive shareholding in Lockheed Martin. And he apparently, according to some of the MPs, was saying, well, we can't talk to Theresa May about Brexit. We've got to talk to her husband, Philip, about Brexit. He's the one that's doing all the organising of the negotiations.
Well, it would make sense if he's heavily embedded with the companies like not only Capital Group, but like you said, Lockheed Martin, the military industrial complex. And this is going to affect trade deals. And what never really gets spoken about those trade deals are the arms deals that are worth billions of dollars. Everybody talks about the tech deals and whatnot, but it is the Raytheons of the world, the Lockheed Martins of the world that have really these no-bid contracts that are part of black budgets.
You could look upon Philip as Theresa May's handler for the last few years, as some MPs have done. So the other contender is Jeremy Hunt. He's going to be, either him or Boris are going to be the new prime minister. As I say, he's very much more anti-Iran. His plan is going to be, I think, to delay. He's even said this, I think we might have to delay it again. Now, of course, most people don't want that in the Conservative Party, the Tory party members. He was a former health secretary, so he was in charge of a massive fight with the Junior Doctors Union when he was in charge. And if anyone can, because he basically renegotiated their contracts and forced them to try and do it. And it's the first time we've ever had a junior doctors strike in Britain. He was behind all that, trying to basically chip away at the respect there is and the rewards there are, financial rewards for trainee doctors in Britain, a very important part of the National Health Service. And also he cut back massively on GPs, general practitioners, the ordinary doctors that we go and see for free here in Britain. And it's becoming much, much more difficult to actually get an ordinary doctor's appointment. That was Jeremy Hunt's job. His family connections, well, his dad was Admiral of the Fleet, and his cousin, well, I mean, obviously very, very strong military connections there. And his cousin was another Health Secretary, Virginia Bottomley, who was in charge of something called Care in the Community back in the 1990s, where loads of people were basically kicked out of mental hospitals where they were being treated. Very good mental hospital system we had, and basically they were just sent home. He's also, when he was in charge of the media regulation in Britain a few years before that, he worked for Rupert Murdoch basically and tried to get Rupert Murdoch everything he wanted. So he's an oligarchy man, and that's why I think he's been put forward as a contender against Boris. But Boris is the sort of wild card, and he definitely is, I would say, the one people will vote for if they want Brexit to actually happen on the 31st of October. But I also ought to say, as a caveat, there's a lot of scare stories around what will happen economically. I think it's quite possible there could be a serious financial crash of some sort as a result of Brexit on the 31st of October, because we know the oligarchy hate the idea of Brexit, so they're quite capable of punishing the entire world, with a run on the pound, and the city being such a powerful, the City of London being such a powerful institution, they want to punish Britain as much as possible to dissuade all the other countries that want to leave, mainly Italy and Greece, that not to try and pursue this whole Brexit and the whole strategy of getting out of the EU. Look, the EU is detonating like a political and social thermobaric weapon. That's what's happening right now. And the whole system in the EU for years has been upside down, but it's been basically chugging along below the radar. The civil service controls the elected politicians in the EU. And I think what's happening, Jason, it'd be interesting to hear what your take is, that there is a wider plan to discredit democracy, to control the political parties with money, the financial institutions, the big corporations, and actually by discrediting democracy to have a collapse of the EU, the democratic institutions for what they're worth there, the European Parliament, is going to allow the banks and the corporations to take over effectively. A crash, a crisis after Brexit will allow them to have the whip hand. They will be the only ones, really, the banks and the corporations, to have the wherewithal to withstand this financial tsunami, because, of course, they'll be in on it. And I think many of us will, it's quite feasible. It always sounds like, although I'm advocating for Brexit, this crash has got to happen at some time. And please, the sooner the better, because all the time we wait, there's more and more money being sucked away from poor people to rich people. And we're living in a much, much less realistic situation with this massive, debt piling up. It's like a cliffhanger waiting to fall at some point. And surely the sooner it falls, the better. And we get this pain over with.
Well, all right, so let's go back. Do you think that Boris, if elected, will be able to do this one way or another, but afterwards you feel like that's where the discrediting will come in internationally? I think that's an interesting take. For instance, on this side of the pond, I don't know if you saw the news yet, but George Soros and Charles Koch, left and right, have now come together to build their own institute, their own think tank called the Quincy Institute. And what is the goal of this institute? Well, it's to stop the United States' forever wars. Now remember, the United States is supposed to be this beacon of democracy and freedom, but however, if they get delegitimized internationally because of all these wars of aggression, if a false flag or two or some funding from the inside sneaks by, or some internal reports that somebody in the FBI may have helped it along, etc., that further discredits democracy. I totally see that. And I think it's through, unfortunately, not democracy's failures, but the national security state that's built upon democracy and in the name of democracy that works with the military-industrial complex for these type of conflicts, whether they be economic or military. Yeah, that's what they're going to use. I absolutely agree with that. Now, my question to you is, this happens. We just had the EU appoint their latest government, what does a crash like that look like? Obviously, you've already had a ton of immigration. You've had really a cultural shift in that region like never before. The media focuses on characters like Tommy Robinson and others, I believe, really to incite people and try to get them to fight with one another rather than focusing on issues like Brexit. So what does it look like if Johnson gets in, October 31st, Halloween happens, and it's a no deal and you're out?
Well, it's their Halloween. That's their. The idea is, well, yes, you can have your Brexit, but we're going to make it hell. Seriously. Also, look, just to backtrack slightly, 70% of Conservative, these are the people who are going to vote either Hunt or Boris, back suspending Parliament, right? Because Parliament won't vote for anything. And it seems that they're just completely against the idea of Brexit. Well, they are. And so it looks like the only way for the Conservative Party to survive is to have a Conservative government under Boris potentially, which will actually make Brexit happen. And it may have to suspend Parliament in order to do that. There are also Remainer cabinet ministers who may not be cabinet ministers with Boris, obviously, but they are plotting also to sabotage a no-deal Brexit. So you've got a civil war going on in the Conservative Party at the same time. These people also may vote no confidence motion against Boris, so from his own party, to cause an even bigger political crisis. So we could be in for a rocky time here in the UK. But look, going back to what you asked about the what's it going to look like? It's going to look really crazy, really nasty. The idea is to send a shockwave out, the old Naomi Klein shock doctrine, to say, well, hey guys, you really did the wrong thing here. You voted for the wrong thing. We're in charge, and we're going to punish you for voting for the wrong thing. By that time, this new European government will be in place. As I said, the government is civil servants, so these are appointees. So the main person, if you remember Donald Tusk, he's the president of the European Council. This is where all the leaders get together. The president of that council is an appointee, and it was Tusk. The new one is going to be a guy called Charles Michel. We'll be hearing a bit more about him in the future. He is a mega migration man. He's been so enthusiastic about extra migration into Belgium when he was Belgian Prime Minister that he lost a no confidence vote in December last year and was booted out as Prime Minister. So this gives you he's the perfect person to be the president of the European Council, chairing all those meetings of the European leaders, because he's a failed politician, somebody the people and the Belgian people kicked out in December last year. The next one on the list is the European Commission president. That was Jean-Claude Juncker. The new one is going to be Ursula von der Leyen. And she is the main spearhead behind the European army, the EU army. I remember her very well from Bilderberg 2016, just before the Brexit referendum in Dresden, when we were surprised to hear, oh, who is this person, Ursula von der Leyen, who's been sitting next to Henry Kissinger up at the top table at supper on Saturday night? Because obviously she is fated for great things. Many of us were saying, speculating at the time, that she would probably be the replacement for Merkel, because Merkel was obviously on her way out. But no, she gets an even more important job. Her job as president of the EU Commission, that is to say the president of Europe is what they call it, even though, of course, they're not elected, is to bring together the EU army, to take that steps forward over the next few years to integrate all of the different armed forces into one. So that's her. The next important, well, in many ways, even more important role is the European Central Bank president. Was Mario Draghi, a terrible, terrible person. I mean, really just a puppet of the oligarchy. He's going to be replaced by Christine Lagarde, former head, or at the moment, she's the boss of the IMF. And she was involved in this thing called the TAPIE scandal, TAPIE scandal, $500 million bribe paid to a fraudster in France, which she nearly went to jail for. She managed to skip jail. She was supposed to do a year in jail for that crime, giving this guy the money, TAPIE the money, $500,000. And then they went, oh, okay, well, we'll just forget about that, Christine, because we don't want to ruin your career. We've got other things for you. So she's a convicted fraudster taking over the European Central Bank. You see how crazy this gets. And then finally, the Foreign Secretary or the Foreign and Security Minister Commissioner, Federica Mogherini, as a woman, she's being replaced by someone called Josep Borrell. Okay, so he's the most interesting of the lot, actually. He's pro-Iran and he's pro-Venezuela. So he is really upset. The Israelis don't want him to be foreign minister or foreign secretary or whatever it is in the EU. But again, they're all pretty much failed politicians. All of these people are people. Another thing to say, Jason, just quickly, I remembered that because Lagarde is going down from the IMF, who's going to be taking over? This is the question at the IMF. These are the big banksters of the planet, basically, that have been impoverishing African countries, bullying the world, economic warfare central for the last 40, 50 years. And the one who I've seen has been potentially nominated to take over from her, none other than the great George Osborne. Bullingdon Club member, chancellor that introduced the massive austerity, which has led to such terrible hardship here in Britain, the massive expansion of food banks where people have to go 2 or 3 times a week to beg basically for food to feed their family, even when they're in a job here in the UK, particularly in the north of England. It's a real there's George Osborne, and he's being cited as someone who might possibly take over the IMF, Jason.
It's pretty incredible stuff. I mean, again, I'm hesitant to even predict what's going to happen. Honestly, I mean, I thought first of all, I didn't think Brexit was going to get through. I thought that they would find a way to rig it against the people in that first vote. And hey, the people got out in the streets and it happened. Then they said, no, we're not going to leave. We're going to rework it. I didn't see May stepping down. So, I mean, I have no idea. I don't know a lot about the culture there. I know that in my comments, when I talk about Boris Johnson, some people comment and say, oh, it's our Trump over here. He's kind of like this, boorish character that's out in the spotlight all the time. But the bottom line is, if he's willing to take them out, and this isn't him including some larger plot to destabilize Britain, I think this is a positive thing. I don't know how you feel. I don't know where we're going to be really as a team nation in, I don't know, even 6 weeks with the situation in Iran. It is the United Kingdom.
Okay. So Boris is not a safe pair of hands at all. But by the way, of course, Trump is actually in many ways better qualified than Boris. Boris has never run big businesses, big companies, and I imagine he's had some dealings with the mafia, as Trump has obviously spent 100%. Most of his life, going back begging on his hands and knees to the mafia, please can I have some more money, and of course that puts him in a rather compromised position. But I mean, yes, certainly I think it's important we don't have your Jeremy Hunt. I'd see him as equivalent to Hillary Clinton, as someone who's basically just an operator for the oligarchy. He's a bit of a wild card, Boris, but he's much more interested in seeming popular and being popular, so very difficult to see how he's going to. The other thing is, it was a fascinating thing, Jason, the other day on the radio here, one of the debates where he was told, well, you keep making these gaffes, Boris, and he said, well, actually, yes, but some of those gaffes are actually just me telling the truth. So he does do this. I mean, for example, Foreign Office briefings that he's getting, secret intelligence stuff, sometimes he just comes out with it live on the BBC. So you just never know quite what's going to happen with him. Also, I think well worth looking. It's a funny thing going on in the European Parliament, which very few people have looked at, which is that there are 27 reserve MEPs that have been elected but haven't taken up their seats because they're waiting for the 27 Brits from the Brexit Party and the rest of them. I mean, by the way, of course, the Brexit Party is now the biggest single party in the European Parliament. It's enormously powerful. And of course, they get a lot of speaking time where they just take the mickey out of the others and they say it like it is, which is amazing to hear this stuff. But Riho Teres is one of these reserve MEPs. He's from Estonia. And he's, guess what? He's the chief of the general staff of Estonia. It's now an MEP waiting to take over when the Brits leave.
And let me stop you there.
A military chief. He says he would prefer Britain not to leave. Well, all I can say is you're the ex-chief of general staff of Estonia. What business is it of yours whether we leave or not? We voted to leave. Why are you saying you'd rather we didn't? Well, we know the oligarchy don't want us to. His wife, Riho Teres's wife, is the Estonian ambassador to the EU. So his whole family's on this gravy train now. And his day job is what? Guess what? The head of an arms manufacturer in Estonia's robotics department. Mm-hmm. These are the kind of people now that are coming into EU politics. And as soon as the Brits leave, he's one of the people who are going to be making decisions for 800 million Europeans in the European Parliament. So you can see what's going on here. It's a militarization, a complete control of Brussels, which is the sort of thing which was really envisaged, I think, in the first place when it was very first started, as a kind of way of just managing Europe as a cartel system and a dictatorship system where the people get no say whatsoever. They're just told what to do by this Brussels bureaucracy. And the Brussels bureaucracy, of course, sits right next door to NATO headquarters in Brussels.
And I'm glad you brought up Estonia. Because I'm going to let you close it out after I make this point. Estonia is this like biometric global citizen model. With their international ID cards, their push for that, their push for international banking, cashless society control grid. TruthStream Media did like a 25-minute video just on Estonia and its policies like a year and a half ago. And I dated an Estonian national for some time, like, I don't know, it's got to be 5 or 6 years ago now. But her father was in politics.
Was she chipped? Had she been microchipped?
She had not taken any kind of chip, but we actually had conversations about that because she was talking about her identification card even then. And I was like, listen, Estonia is kind of pushing this EU globalization, global citizen, less cash, more surveillance model. And it's very frightening. I definitely recommend people check out that TruthStream Estonian piece. I wish I knew what the title was. But Mr.
Well, look, I mean, there's a subtext to all of this stuff, though, Jason, which is this stuff is really creepy and really weird. And the idea is it's so creepy and so weird that you don't want to think about it. And that's how they do this. You know, what they do is they slide this stuff under the radar. None of this goes through the media, the parliament. It's just done to us. You know, in Sweden, we've now got the real pioneering of human microchipping going on. What they do say, of course, is it's all voluntary. Then suddenly you find, oh, well, if you want to keep your job, it's mandatory. If you want to carry on going to your skiing club or whatever, it's mandatory. If you want to get into the apartment complex, it's mandatory. And that's the way they play it. Also, of course, you get discounts, financial discounts, if you get yourself chipped. And I mean, this is revelation territory, really. I mean, this is one of the things I've often found it fascinating to see just how close some of what we're doing now is coming to that. And of course, we've got the Zionists now, in the Likud party. They are actually pushing for war with Iran to threaten the existence of Israel, if you could believe that, to threaten their own country's existence and force. This is according to David Livingstone, who's a Canadian writer, to force the Jewish Messiah to appear, because they've been waiting for the Jewish Messiah for such a long time. And if he appears, David says, he might be the Antichrist. These are the sorts of things that we talk about from time to time on the radio in Bristol, which gets us into trouble occasionally. But I think these things need to be said, because the mainstream press is just not looking at these things, which certainly in the 1970s, loads of people were talking about the idea of being chipped. Now it's happening. No one seems to want to talk about it.
Yeah, and it's not even happening on a hobby level, like you said. I have covered, especially Sweden, where, they tried to make it trendy in clubs, et cetera, and then all of a sudden it was owners of businesses, and we just thought this was a good idea, and then you find out that they get a contract, and that everybody's going to get a little bit more of a pension, et cetera, and these are initiative programs. Tony Gosling, tell people where they can find you and what they should be looking at right now.
Okay, so our weekly show is at thisweek.org.uk in Bristol, where you can hear. Last week we had, I tell you what, it was amazing. We had on Friday we had a live broadcast of the Venezuelan ambassador to Britain and the Nicaraguan ambassador and the Cuban ambassador all talking about the shadow that the US and the Pentagon is casting over Latin America. And we carried that live. Absolutely amazing to hear some of the tactics which are being used really to blockade these countries, particularly what's been happening with the Venezuela. And the speech by the Venezuelan ambassador was really touching. And, she sounded really frightened about what's happening over there. They feel defenseless against this economic warfare going on against their country and the blockade. And so that's at thisweek.org.uk, but we do this every week, and we always try and do a bit of investigative journalism too, of one sort or another. I've got the Bilderberg website, a domain name which was paid for by one of Henry Kissinger's goddaughter's sisters back in the mid-1990s. Bless her, when I was absolutely penniless, but still trying to get stuff out there. And that's bilderberg.org. The other website I run is it's 911forum.org.uk, where we discuss pretty much every sort of terrorist and weird and wonderful assassination, things like that, as they happen, Jason, trying to do what the mainstream media just fails to, so it's possible to do it. It's actually not that difficult, I find, but they are absolutely running scared of telling the truth these days because the truth is too hot to handle.
Absolutely. Tony, thank you very much. And guys, I'm doing 3, 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7 videos a day. Make sure to smash the like button, thumbs this up. If you're not a member of the Burmese Brigade, get there, subscribe now. And listen, it's a nonpartisan world here. We're doing interviews with Gosling, Grove, Robbie Martin. We had Dylan Avery on today. We're trying to get every voice out there we can. It's not about left and right. It's always been about right and wrong. And I will see you guys on the flip side.